Welcome to Crossroads, a show by the Epoch Times where we bring you insights beyond the headlines. As always, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps the show reach more people, so help us get it out there. Now look, first off, I just want to say I was right. That's right. I'm doing a victory lap. Basically, Iran has now carried out its promise to retaliate, and it went basically exactly like I said it would. It was limited. There were no American casualties. Its plans to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, it's already being halted. Oil prices did not go up. They actually went down, lo and behold. I want to briefly show you some of this, then we'll get into some other topics. But look, first off, on the Iranian missile attack, Iran fired a barrage of 6 missiles at a U.S. military base in Qatar. All of them were intercepted. There were no U.S. casualties. It was also revealed after Iran even alerted the United States of the attack ahead of time. They basically said, hey, get your guys out. We're going to do this for a show. President Trump then posted about it on Truth Social. He wrote, I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody to be injured. Perhaps Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony in the region, and I will enthusiastically encourage Israel to do the same. He then called Iran's attack weak. So Trump revealed that they did this all for show and then made fun of them. Now, as I said yesterday, this was expected. They have to posture. They need to respond, but it would be symbolic, and it was. But on that point also, Qatar, they were very unhappy about the Iranian retaliation. And this was given the U.S. military base is in Qatar, at least that one. The country's advisor to the prime minister and their spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs posted a statement on X saying that, again, that's Dr. Mahid al-Ansari. He wrote, quote, the state of Qatar strongly condemns the attack that targeted Al Ayud air base by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. We consider this a flagrant violation of the sovereignty of the state of Qatar, its airspace, international law, and the United Nations Charter. We affirm that Qatar reserves the right to respond directly in a manner equivalent with the nature and scale of this brazen aggression in line with international law. Presumably that means they'll launch 6 rockets that will be intercepted because they'll tell them ahead of time. He adds as well, quote, we reassured that Qatar's air defenses successfully thwarted the attack and intercepted the Iranian missiles. And he also said, quote, we call for the immediate cessation of all military actions and for a serious return to the negotiating table and dialogue. And also noted the U.S. base had already been evacuated before the attack as a precaution, which Trump said again they did because they were told ahead of time. He also said there were no injuries or casualties among anybody, not just U.S. troops, but including also civilians in Qatar. No casualties at all. Now, in terms of Russia and whether they're going to get involved, so Putin is now saying that Russia is making efforts to, quote, assist the Iranian people. Now, there are no suggestions this is about military action, although it's unclear. My personal take, this looks like he's offering humanitarian work. He's offering to help them. He's not offering to get involved militarily. And there's also the issue of whether Iran is going to close the Strait of Hormuz, right? The little trade choke point they have there. The short answer is probably not. Now, as I mentioned, closing that trade choke point would have very little effect on the United States. In fact, the Trump administration even sent out alerts telling the oil companies, don't raise your prices if they shut this down because it's not necessary. It would basically be that, again, oil shipments going to China would probably skyrocket. Oil companies, being businesses, might want to raise the prices because they want to match it. They don't have to. The only reason they would do that is for personal interest in business. Trump told them not to do it. If Iran did close that strait, it would mostly only affect countries in that region, like Iran itself, ironically. Heavily, it would affect Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia to an extent, and others. But especially, more than anybody, it would affect China because, well, they buy most of their oil through there. And also importantly, most of these are not shipments to the United States. Again, China would be hit the hardest on that front. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was calling on the CCP to even ask Iran to not block the shipments. And the CCP actually did make a call for that. They're trying to lower tensions. Oil prices did not go up. Like I said, it would not, as some outlets were claiming they would. Instead, oil prices actually went down. The price of gas went down, at least for a little bit. Also, the Trump administration is taking its own victory lap. They released a video of the B-2 stealth bombers used in the attacks. It started with them filmed at night in the hangars and then switches to footage of them landing after the 37-hour mission. They released the video without commentary. It's just the planes being shown in different areas. And also, not just that, yesterday, Donald Trump announced that Israel and Iran have agreed to a, quote, complete and total ceasefire. It didn't fully work out. I'll talk about it in a sec, but this is what Trump wrote on Truth Social. He said this: congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now. They violated it already. Get into it. When Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their progress, final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end of the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful on the assumption that everything works out as it should, which it will. He was wrong, but he said, which it will. I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. Now, Vice President J.D. Vance appeared on Fox News Special Report last night also to talk about what comes after all of this. Let me show you what he said. Watch.
What that means, I think, is we have to talk to Iran and, of course, to Israel about what the future holds. Because while we have obliterated the Iranian nuclear program, our hope and our expectation is that they're not going to try to rebuild that program. And I think that's what the president is really trying to figure out here, is to build a long-term settlement here to where we can have peace in the region. And I think the president really hit the reset button and said, look, let's actually produce long-term peace for the region. That's always been his goal. I actually think when we look back, we will say the 12-day war was an important reset moment for the entire region.
And that brings us to where we are now. Both Israel and Iran violated the ceasefire and launched missiles. Basically, Israel launched airstrikes on Iran ahead of the ceasefire. Iran launched a rocket that did not land, overshot its target, and then Israel vowed to retaliate. Then Israel struck an Iranian radar in response and then pulled back. And the latest as of now, according to Trump, the ceasefire is back in effect. Trump was very unhappy with both of them, even made his statements clear on this. Earlier this morning, after all the back and forth between Israel and Iran, Trump stated on Truth Social, Israel is not going to attack Iran. All planes will turn around and head home, while doing a friendly plane wave to Iran, maybe waving out the window, right? He said nobody will be hurt. The ceasefire is in effect. Trump was very unhappy with both countries. He said he's very unhappy with Israel even. Interestingly, even a lot of the conservative commentators who've kind of not been too favorable with this, they were very happy about Trump's response. Trump said these countries have no idea what they're doing. They've been fighting so long, they have no idea what they're doing. And he's pushing for peace. He's trying to get them to stop shooting each other. Now, we'll have to see how this develops over the next few days. And now, well, there's the possibility also of a regime change in Iran. It's not clear whether this is still on the table. I think it is. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break. And if you're enjoying this show, don't forget to hit the like button.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of five-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. If you're just joining in, support us by hitting the like button, subscribe to Crossroads, and let me know what you think of the channel. It helps us to beat the algorithm. Now look, as all this took place, I want to point something out. Israel and its strikes on Iran, well, there was one that could be pretty controversial. One of the missiles struck the Evin prison in Tehran. And why is that problematic? Well, that prison they struck also holds a lot of political prisoners. And that could be an issue because while there might be some terrorists in there, that prison is symbolic among the opposition parties. Although the story is being framed in a few different ways. To me, personally, it sounds that this is not an attack on the prisoners. They were trying to eliminate some of the officials working at the prison. BBC said this: Israel has struck Tehran's notorious Evin prison and damaged parts of the facility, which holds many political detainees, Iran's judiciary says. Israel's defense minister said it hit regime targets and agencies of government repression across Tehran, including Evin. It notes that France's foreign minister said the strike on the prison was unacceptable because it endangered the lives of two of its citizens held there. It notes that Evin prison houses thousands of men and women, including prominent political dissidents, human rights defenders, journalists, and dual and foreign nationals. One verified video showed damaged vehicles and debris scattered across a street. Another showed significant damage to the Sahidid Magadas prosecutor's office, a special security branch located inside the security complex. They note it's not clear how many casualties there were and whether civilians are among them. However, the prosecutor's office is usually filled during working hours, it says, with inmates' relatives, lawyers, as well as prosecutors and judges, who are probably, in my take, the targets of this. It notes inmates at Evin's women's section reportedly told their families the ceiling was damaged and that panic broke out among prisoners, although they did not report any injuries, meaning they did not kill the prisoners. So what does this mean? It seems like Israel was more targeting the prosecutors and the judges at the prison, my personal take, although again, details are still thin. And if Iran's making the reports, they can kind of say whatever they want on who was killed with this. There's also some pretty important stuff with this. When they say they hit regime targets and agencies of government repression across Tehran, that's important because if Israel's saying that, at least to me, this suggests they're no longer just about nuclear weapons or enrichment. If you're hitting regime targets and, quote, agencies of government repression, well, you're not doing that to take out the nuclear weapons. You're normally doing that if you want to have a regime change. If you're destroying the leaders of the regime, you probably want new leadership, right? And what else is happening right alongside this? Well, there's a key figure now trying to push for regime change. Guess who it is? It's Iran's former prince from before the 1979 revolution that installed the current regime. This is Pahlavi Reza, and he just gave a press conference where he spoke about his push for a new government in Iran and his push for a transition to democracy.
I am stepping forward to lead this national transition, not out of personal interest, but as a servant of the Iranian people. I have a clear plan for transition and national renewal. Our transition and future democracy will be based on these three core principles: Iran's territorial integrity, individual liberties and equality of all citizens, separation of religion and state. The final form of this future democracy we seek will be for the Iranian people to decide in a national referendum.
Now, during that speech, he discusses where he sees the problems with the current regime, and he goes deeper into his personal plans for the future of Iran. He also gave more details about what's happening with the Iranian leadership. Interestingly, he alleged the regime leader and his family are currently making preparations to flee the country. They're trying to leave Iran. He also said the military has been fractured. I think that's obvious because they killed a lot of the opposition. Basically, Israel killed a lot of the military leadership in Iran. And interestingly, also, he said there's only one way to achieve peace, a secular, democratic Iran. And he added, I am here today to submit myself to my compatriots to lead them down this road to peace and a democratic transition. He said, I do not seek political power, but rather to help our great nation navigate through this critical hour towards stability, freedom, and justice. And alongside that, he also called on the Iranian leader to step down, saying that if he does so, he's going to get a fair trial and due process. And he also promised justice against other regime officials. Anybody who he says has blood on their hands, and it's a lot of them actually. And with that, he also added, quote, to those of you who are loyal to the Iranian nation, meaning, and he said, not the Islamic Republic, he said there's a future for you in a democratic Iran if you join the people now. The choice is yours to make. Suggesting, of course, he's going to start a new kind of government in waiting if the government in Iran does, in fact, collapse. And it seems this is not just some random announcement. The prince is also announcing this movement. He said this directly, quote, to that end, today I'm announcing that I am establishing a formal channel for military, security, and police personnel to reach out directly to me, my team, and our expanding operation. He said this is a secure platform to efficiently manage the growing volume of inbound communications and requests from those breaking with the regime and seeking to join our movement. Interesting. Now, it seems that the Iranian alternative government, I guess we can call it, it's now official. There is a government in waiting to replace the current Iranian regime. I mean, we'll see if that changes. Now they have a peace deal. Again, we'll have to see. In terms of the U.S. stance on all of this, as of this morning, Donald Trump is saying he does not want a regime change. Epoch Times said this, President Donald Trump told reporters in Air Force One on his way to the NATO summit that he does not want regime change in Iran. He said that it would lead to chaos. And he said, quote, I don't want it. I'd like to see everything calm down as quickly as possible. He said regime change takes chaos, and ideally, we don't want to see so much chaos, so we'll see how it does, Trump said. Meaning, if you let the regime collapse, they might have a civil war. Who knows who's going to take power? Yes, you have this prince. There will probably be other people trying to take power, including foreign governments like the CCP. Probably Russia will get involved. That could actually turn into a broader war and a broader proxy war over the future government of Iran. There's no such thing as an uninterfered with transition of power. If a country like Iran, whose future is going to affect a lot of different countries, did in fact collapse, and a new government was going to take control, you would have many other governments trying to, let's say, finagle who wins. And again, for Iran and for terrorism and who's going to fund global terrorism because they're one of the big funders of it, it would be a very consequential issue. Now, again, we'll see if it happens or not, and we'll see what happens with the Crown Prince saying he's going to, be there for them. But in other news, New York could also go nuclear, the good kind of nuclear, not the weapons kind. New York could soon be home to the first major new U.S. nuclear power plant that's been built in more than 15 years. We're finally going back to nuclear power, and this is important for a few different reasons. TechCrunch said this. New York Governor Kathy Hochul announced Monday that her state will host a large new nuclear power plant designed to generate at least 1 gigawatt of electricity. She said if you take nuclear off the table, you have to burn more fossil fuels, Hochul said at a press conference. What a change of narrative, right? Remember, the old narrative was as nuclear was dangerous and unclean. Now they're saying, you know what? It's better than the alternatives. You have to burn less fossil fuels. They're now saying effectively nuclear is the clean energy, which I'd agree with, by the way. But she adds this. That's not going to work for us here in New York. And that's the governor is directing, meaning, again, that going for like dirty power, like fossil fuel stuff, which I'd say even like wind turbines are pretty dirty. But on this note, it says the governor is directing the New York Power Authority, the NYPA, which owns and operates 24 power plants, mostly dams and gas turbines, to develop the new facility. Now it notes Hochul said the state, New York, will work with private partners to develop the power plant and will finance construction while buying the power it generates. Meaning, of course, private developers, and New York will pay for it by purchasing their energy. Now, it notes that among the sites under consideration are 3 nuclear plants currently operating in upstate New York, according to Wall Street Journal. All of them are owned by Constellation Energy, which has been wooing tech companies, it says, to purchase output from its nuclear portfolio. Microsoft and Meta, Facebook, both currently have deals with Constellation. Microsoft is reopening a reactor at 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania in a $1.8 billion project, while Meta is buying clean energy attributes at the Clinton Clean Energy Center in Illinois in a deal that is reportedly worth billions of dollars. They're getting in on the energy industry. It notes that Amazon also recently signed a deal with Talon Energy to buy nearly 2 gigawatts of nuclear in Pennsylvania. Now, when I talk about these big tech companies buying power, remember, if you're running AI, you need huge amounts of energy to power it. And many people have pointed out, you really can't do that without nuclear energy. The amount of energy you need to power the server farms to run AI, you almost need a nuclear power plant just to support a single AI server farm. That's how much energy they need. And so that's why I assume these tech companies are like buying into energy like this. They need it to run AI. But it adds here, the nuclear industry still faces some potential headwinds. No new nuclear power plant has broken ground in the United States in over 15 years. And guess what? We're going back. Now, why is this a big deal? Well, because look, they're not talking about building a solar farm. They're not saying, you know what, Microsoft, who's been on the forefront of green energy for so long, instead of saying, you know what, why don't we build a massive solar farm in the ocean? Why don't we build like, hundreds of acres of wind turbines? They're not talking about that. They're saying, hey, why don't we build 1 nuclear power plant and that'll give us all the energy we get from a massive solar farm. 1 nuclear power plant. They're going back. Now, I've been saying it. Nuclear is the real green energy. And even states that were big on the whole green energy push, like New York, they're now going back to nuclear. This is a huge shift, huge shift. This is a shift in narrative. It's a shift in politics. It's a shift in energy policy. This is a big shift basically overall. If you have New York now, one of the big states that was on the forefront of the green energy push, saying that nuclear, it burns less fossil fuels, meaning they're actually saying it's clean energy. This is a 180 full turnaround on the narrative. New narrative. And importantly also, guess what? This will stop New York, probably, from having to buy electricity from Canada. Remember when Canada was threatening to shut off the electricity in 3 U.S. states, including New York, because of the tariffs? Well, that means the problem could soon be off the table. We won't have to worry about Canada shutting off the electricity. Also, look, the numbers are in now. The riots in LA, guess what? The LA riots cost taxpayers about $32 million. Now, who's to blame for that? Well, this is also becoming the new political issue. Many conservatives are saying, well, you know what? You were rioting, you were burning cars, you were spraying graffiti everywhere. That caused, of course, the need for having police and riot police out on the streets. On the other side of the aisle, though, the local officials in Los Angeles are saying that the ICE raids are to blame because they triggered people to riot. So it's not the rioters' fault for rioting or burning cars or graffitiing everywhere. It's the people who triggered them who's at fault. And they're saying that, again, the ICE raids forced the costly police response and led to the large amounts of property damage. 'Twas not the criminal, 'twas not the burglar who is to blame. It is the property owner for having such nice things that people wanted to steal. Now look, Los Angeles City Comptroller Kenneth Mejia said this, quote, update, ICE raids have now cost LA taxpayers $32 million. 29.5 million, or 92%, relates to LAPD's response to protests, including against ICE, including citywide tactical alert costs. $1.4 million relates to cleanup, public property damage, and they say it does not include potential lawsuits, which will probably be a lot also. And again, probably going to be a long time before they build it all back. Now, also on this point, talking about migration policies and deportations, who remembers the Maryland dad? News outlets are saying that a Maryland dad was falsely sent to El Salvador. Well, the Maryland dad is also the accused MS-13 member who was deported to the prison in El Salvador. Well, look, he's back. He's back in the U.S. A judge ordered also that he asked to be released, but he's also facing trial. The Post-Millennial said this. A judge on Sunday ordered the release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia pending trial. Abrego Garcia is an illegal immigrant who was slated for deportation in 2019, was deported by the Trump administration earlier this year, and then was extradited back to the United States to stand trial for human trafficking in Tennessee. Now, that case is going to be important. In my personal take, what does this all mean? Well, I think when this is all over, he will probably be deported either way. If he's found guilty, they'll probably still deport him. If he's found innocent, they will probably still deport him. And then it will be up to his home country of El Salvador to find out what to do with him. And guess what? In El Salvador, if you so much as have an MS-13 related tattoo, and you could argue he doesn't have MS-13 directly tattooed on him, but he does have symbols that allegedly translate to it, they will throw you in prison. And he will probably be thrown in prison. Now, the trial that he's facing in Tennessee, this is not about whether or not he's in the U.S. illegally. This is not saying, are you an illegal immigrant? It's pretty much sure that he is an illegal immigrant. He's going to be deported one way or the other. But this trial is about his alleged crimes, what he's accused of, right? Well, one of the things he's accused of is human trafficking. There was a video going around of him in a car with multiple alleged illegal immigrants, and again, they accused him of trafficking illegal immigrants. He's also accused of being a member of the gang MS-13. That does not seem to be part of the surface charges, but that will probably be brought up during the trial. And this is important also because, look, his alleged gang membership is what got him sent to El Salvador, like the prison there. Not deported, but actually sent to prison. And also, as you've been seeing, this case has become deeply politicized. This has become a political case. Many officials right here in the United States were arguing that he did not get due process before being sent to a prison in El Salvador. And so what's happening now? Well, he's getting due process. And we're going to see, based on the evidence presented, whether or not he is in fact a member probably of MS-13, but also whether he's a human trafficker or not. Now, also, meanwhile, I want to show you all something. There are some contradicting videos going around, which are important because there's very contradicting narratives going around. The big narrative now is that, well, news outlets posted a really serious incident, what looked like one. Police violence. The full video shows a very different story, though. Basically, what the media is saying right now is that border agents were seen beating a man. They were beating him, punching him. Now, the full video is a little different. I want to show you both of them. First, let me show you what the media is saying. Now, look, this is the story from KTLA. and they posted a pretty terrible looking video. A group of Border Patrol agents are seen punching a man on the ground while they arrest him. I should note, when it comes to law enforcement, if an individual is resisting arrest, they're allowed to do that. KTLA wrote this, though. They said in a graphic video that has since gone viral on social media, about 7 or more masked men, they're calling U.S. agents now masked men, masked men wearing U.S. Border Patrol vests are seen violently detaining Santa Ana father before forcing him into the back of an unmarked car. Again, masked individuals stealing an individual, beating him and throwing him in a vehicle. These are Border Patrol agents, obviously, but they're, again, framing it a bit differently. Now, you can see the video there, what that looks like. It looks terrible. The Department of Homeland Security responded to that post with a different video. And the different video shows the fuller context of what actually happened. And the video, seen in the full context, shows the suspect appearing to attack agents using a weed whacker. And now the video does show the individual appears to run at officers with the weed whacker. He swings it in their direction. Homeland Security wrote, quote, "He assaulted federal law enforcement with a weed whacker. Perhaps the mainstream media would like our officers to stand there and be mowed down instead of defending themselves. What a completely slanted portrayal of what actually happened." Now, look, anyway, I don't know, justified, unjustified, you tell me what you think. Do you think it's justified or not? I would personally say either way, context matters. Honest journalism should show the full context. You don't edit something because you want to make it look one way. Now, unfortunately, there are also a lot of incidents like this where just part of the picture is shown. And a lot of organizations and news outlets do that because they want to push a certain narrative. They don't want to show you the full context because the full context does not align with what they're trying to push. And look, on that point, look, do you know why the wave of claims of police violence and brutality has mostly come to an end? Do you know what ended a lot of the big, protests against police violence? The answer is body cam footage. That's right. Body cam footage has become the greatest enemy of these narratives because when you see the actual body cam footage, they'll say police violence, and then you see a crazed-looking individual like midair with a knife, flying at a police officer. Body cam footage is what has mostly ended these narratives, folks. Now that said, let me know what you think in the chat. Let's jump into some questions. All right. See, first off, Seymour Butts, you're saying, Josh, so what if we bombed the nuke plants? You talk about Iran. Can't Iran just buy a nuke from China or Russia? Yes and no. It would be, again, if they did that, it would be like the Cuban Missile Crisis. They do it already to an extent. Let me explain to you how the whole. It's like a game of charades. It's a game that everybody knows, everybody's playing, but you're not supposed to acknowledge everybody's playing it, but they talk about it publicly. Okay, here's how the whole nuclear program works, right? Countries basically part of that group, Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, they send each other parts. They don't send finished weapons, they send each other parts. So for example, they might send them rocket parts, but they'll say it's not for rockets, it's for a space program. These are for your space program, comrade. Be sure to send that into space, but not on an intercontinental ballistic missile, which again has to leave orbit and then come back down, right? Don't do that with it. This is for your space program. So they send them missile parts, and they say it's to build rocket ships. Like Trump used to call North Korea, remember Rocket Man? Remember Trump had Rocket Man? Rockets, they're for rockets, buddy. They do that. They also have programs where they do nuclear enrichment. Interestingly, Russia controls most of the uranium industry. Part of that, there's a big controversy in the U.S. When Russia purchased Uranium-1, which is a Canadian nuclear company. Russia controls the market on uranium. Now, some countries also get it. Again, part of the reason, this is the whole other side with nuclear power plants, part of the reason countries want to build nuclear power plants is because you get uranium from them. And they can use that, enrich it, and when you enrich it beyond a certain threshold, the only reason you would do that is to build a nuclear weapon. They also share research. There's some kind of interconnection between scientists and stuff like that. There's a lot of that going on. But again, a lot of this is done somewhat in disguise. They can't do it on the surface. And so this gets into the area of what you call dual-use weapons, meaning you can use it for military, but you can also use it for science or business or something else. And when they sell it to them, they say that's for science or business or something else. They don't say it's for weapons. A lot of that goes on. If they were to directly ship nuclear weapons, it would violate, international agreements. It would violate international standards. It would violate, UN agreements and whatever else. And I mean, look, the reality, it's a game as far as I'm concerned. Everybody knows they're doing it. But there are certain lines you can't cross in that game. Imagine you're playing a game and everybody's kind of bending the rules, but you're not allowed to break the rules. It's kind of like that. And so they can't overstep that certain line, or what happens? Well, you get the hose again, as Trump just showed Iran. They overstepped the line, they got the hose again, is what happened. We should note that Israel has, over the course of many years, destroyed Iran's nuclear power facilities or nuclear programs many times. This is the most thorough destruction I think we've seen before. And again, they crossed the line. They broke the rules. And so that was the consequence. And Trump is basically saying that also. He's saying that if we just keep making threats and we don't act on them, there's nothing behind it. And so Trump is basically showing the world, if America says there's a line, don't cross it, you don't cross it. Or this happens. And that's where things are at. Kenneth Harris, you're saying, Josh, what are the odds you think a regime change will actually occur? The more things change, the more they seem to remain. What do I think? It's going to be complicated. It's going to be complicated. So if there is a regime change in Iran, I don't think the United States wants to be involved. I think Israel would like to do it. I think Israel would very much like to do it. But I don't know if they're going to do it. I think it comes down to whether or not they can establish good relations with the existing Iranian government. But the other big piece of all of this is just social unrest in Iran itself. A lot of people in Iran are not happy with the leadership. A lot of them want regime change. And even outside of anybody trying to finagle the whole thing, if this crown prince, again, prior to the 1979 revolution with the Shah of Iran, if he wants to continue his movement, he might actually capture enough people like on his side, generals, police, again, civil servants or government officials. He might actually be able to do this. Now, the other big problem you're going to have is, again, it's going to become a proxy war behind the scenes. This is like Cold War type stuff. This is my personal opinion. If Russia's promising humanitarian aid, what does that mean? It means Russia wants to have a presence on the ground in Iran. And what's that going to look like? Well, it's going to look like humanitarian aid and maybe rebuilding stuff, but it's also going to look like a security operation, right? You see what I'm saying? And so humanitarian aid can also double as a security operation, preventing social unrest, preventing regime change. Maybe they'll say, we need to make sure there are no riots. If people want food, we need to feed them. And if people protest trying to stop the innocent people from getting food, we need to put down those riots. It might look like that. We will see what happens. But I do think, without a doubt, There is existing social unrest, and there are countries that want a regime change. We'll see what happens. Jerry, you're saying, Josh, do you think the regime change will result with an Iranian government in waiting being a true republic or more a socialist democracy with China backing most of it? That's the other big part of this. Even if there is a regime change, let's talk about this in the most benign way possible. What happens if you form a new government? Well, obviously, your country has international relations. What does that mean? It means that every country that you had relations with wants to either maintain their existing relations or try to establish new relations. What does that look like? It means that as soon as you form a new government, basically every country in the region, every major power, will try to have diplomatic relations with you. And there's a few ways you can do that. Now, it's typically more easy to maintain the way things were previously. Because if you had international trade, that's your economy. If you had international security agreements, that's your military and that's your defense. If you have international agreements on construction, you probably need that because there's a good chance during the regime change, you probably had a bit of a civil war and things got damaged. And so what do you want? Imagine you're a new leader, you come into a country, you just took control of it. What do you want? You want stability, right? The first thing you want is stability. You don't want people freaking out. You don't want people trying to overthrow you. You want them to recognize you as the new leader. You want legitimacy. That means also good international relations. And you also don't want to upset things. That means you need to immediately stabilize the economy. It means you need to immediately stabilize defense, stabilize policing, and stabilize the ability of people to have what they need. Social stability, right? Food, schools, basic civil services. All of that needs to be done right away. What is the easiest way to do that? You maintain the status quo. Now, that doesn't mean you can't change the government. You can change the policies, but you need to maintain all the foundations. And so what does it look like for Iran? Well, who are their biggest friends? They're good friends with Russia. They're really good friends with the CCP. They're not really good friends with a lot of other people, but that might change. And so if I were to look at the situation, here's how I see it would work. This is what I think Iran would become if they had the prince come in. They'd become more like an Egypt or more like a Qatar. They would probably still have a lot of ties to the different factions. One thing a lot of people don't realize about these countries, they're very tribal. You can't view them as being a single faction. I'm talking like if you go to Libya or Egypt or many countries in that region, like Lebanon, there are a lot of different tribes. They're very, very, very tribal. A lot of the tribes don't get along with each other. And when you talk about terror, in the West, when we talk about terrorists, in a lot of those countries, they don't see them like that. They see them as tribes. And some of these tribes just don't get along with each other. Some of these tribes are very delicate. They will feud and fight you very quickly if you stir things up even slightly wrong. And they need to be able to maintain good relations on a tribal level. I know it sounds, we don't often talk about this in American politics, but it's one of the key things that often gets overlooked in these regions. Anybody who is maybe a veteran out there, anybody out there who was in Afghanistan or Iraq, I assume you've all had encounters with the very polarizing nature of the different tribes and their very complicated relations with each other, right? For example, in Afghanistan, a lot of the Taliban was Pashtun. A lot of the Taliban was Pashtun. And when people talk about the way that the maps were drawn up in these countries, and they blame Britain for it, right? Pashtun territory also goes into Pakistan. And so that's why you had like the tribal region of the Pashtun, and you had the Taliban effectively operating cross-border. It's because it's a tribal region. They're the same tribe. The tribes are very complicated. Iran would be the same way. They'd be the same way. And then there's also divisions among the Shia and the Sunni Muslims. You know, Iran would be a different faction than Saudi Arabia, for example. What does that mean? Well, they would have to get along to an extent as much as possible, despite religious differences. And the other big side of it is this. I think the biggest part is if, again, the Crown Prince is promising what? Democracy. Well, what does that mean? Look, folks, Hamas is a democratically elected government in Gaza, right? Hamas is democratically elected. They might elect a terrorist group. You never know. That might happen. One of the reasons why these countries tend to be kingdoms and not democracies. I don't know how well democracy is going to work, personally, for a country like that. But the other thing they're promising is, of course, something else. They're promising to end or to create a type of separation of church and state, which, when you're dealing with a government that also basically claims to be the leaders of the religion, which means if you criticize the leaders, you're accused of criticizing the religion and they can kill you. They use religion as a form of social control, right? Which is part of the what they called it the Egyptian model of Islam. It was a more authoritarian version that merged it into a socialist government. Iran practices that. And so if they changed that, what would that also mean? Well, guess what? They would probably also have to fight with the religious leaders, right? And if they had to fight with the religious leaders who are also the government officials, that would be a very messy situation. I think when Trump talks about this and Trump says that he does not want a regime change because it would be chaos, I think he's right. It would be chaos. It absolutely would. But I do think it would eventually settle. And I don't know, maybe the end result would be worth it. Depends on who you ask. But the other big problem I think a lot of people have, including, I've seen a lot of conservatives very worried about this because they're like, you know, in the past, we've watched this happen. We thought we were killing the bad guy, and then a worse guy took over in that region. Is this really something we want? And it is, unfortunately, a bit. It's like Russian roulette. You don't know who's going to get the bullet, right? And so, I don't know. In my personal take, my personal opinion, a regime change would only work if there was foreign involvement. Israel would have to be deeply involved. The United States would probably have to be deeply involved. Saudi Arabia would probably have to be deeply involved because guess what? China and Russia absolutely would be involved. And so there would be international interests steering this, and a regime change would turn out probably very bad if the U.S. was not part of that. And so I don't know if it's going to happen, just given the fact that Trump doesn't seem he's interested in it personally. My take, at least, right? Let's see, another question here. Martin McKenzie, anyone remember when there was no such thing as Islamic terrorism? That's right. Interestingly, right? The issue of Islamic terrorism was, and look, a lot of this is forgotten history because it's been going on for so long. A lot of this is forgotten history. When did the big problems of Middle East terrorism start up? You're talking about Yasser Arafat, right? the head of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, right? That was when they were seizing airliners and killing people and everything else. Yasser Arafat was a terrorism leader. And who was Yasser Arafat? Yasser Arafat was a trained operative of the Soviet Union and the Chinese Communist Party. It was a communist movement. That was Yasser Arafat. And so communism was always a terrorist movement. Now, prior to this, what was Islam like prior to, let's say, the rise of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood? You can go back and watch videos of the Egyptian king laughing that there were these crazy people who wanted to bring back the ancient days where women had to wear hijabs and the men all had to wear the white things they wear and everything else. And they were laughing. They thought it was hilarious. They were like, what a bunch of crazy people. That will never happen. And then it happened, right? It was not something that they imagined happening. And so going back in time, what took place, the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood was a socialist communist movement, right? You had Sayyid al-Qutb, I believe it was. I'm probably saying his name wrong. Who wrote the book in the footsteps of the Quran, I believe, and he merged the teachings of Karl Marx and communism into Islam. He integrated communism into Islam, and he basically perverted the religion using communism with the intent of turning the religion into basically a communist movement. They called that the Egyptian model of Islam. It was not the religion before that. They then started revolutions. That individual was actually killed. They executed him in Egypt. But his movement started up various revolutions in different parts of the Arab regions. Russia was heavily involved with that, again, when they were the Soviet Union. And one thing that Russia also did, this was through Romania. What they did through Romania was they started spreading, they started spreading the protocols of the Elders of Zion, right? Which is this it's a book that basically frames Jews as being like the enemy of the free world. That book was a revision of two prior books. The first one actually was about it was something like the Conversations in Hell of Machiavelli, and it was actually a criticism of Machiavellianism, which was, if you read the book The Prince, it was ways to control governments without actually overthrowing them. Machiavelli, I know I'm going back into a lot of history. This Machiavelli, of course, being in Italy, kind of formed the model of how to control a country using a mafia. The book, the Conversations in Hell, were about Machiavellianism and how countries are trying to control other countries using these underhanded tactics. That book was later rewritten where they replaced Machiavelli with, I believe, the Jesuits. So the second one was a criticism of the Jesuits. And then someone took that book and then replaced the Jesuits with the Jews, and that was the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. The Soviet Union and Romania spread that all across the Arab region. And the purpose was to basically frame U.S. support of Israel with the intent of basically saying they're your enemy, and the Soviet Union and communism are here to protect you from it, but mostly America is the enemy because they back them, right? The little Satan and the big Satan. And so, what do you get? A few generations of that, and it's become entrenched. People forget where the ideas came from. And so these ideas now are just entrenched in that region. People don't remember where they came from. You've had wars, you've had conflicts, you have blood feuds. You have hundreds of years, thousands of years of wars on top of all of that. And that's where you are now, a very complicated region with very complicated relations and a whole lot of subversion. And yes, terrorism has become a thing separated from all this. I should note when I talked about the Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, the terrorist organization Al-Qaeda, was a breakaway movement from the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood wanted to create communism, again, using the shell of Islam. The Muslim Brotherhood wanted to create communism mainly through subversion, social revolutions, and stuff like that. Al-Qaeda was more the violent revolution branch. They wanted terrorism. And so they became more the extreme violent arm of that same movement. And you know, you've seen where things have gone with that. Short history of the region and how they got to where they're at, right? Another question, Ashley from California, is saying the U.S. does not have a great track record with regime changes in other countries. You know, America is fantastic with winning wars. We're not fantastic with staying in those countries for like a decade and trying to change their culture. We're not very good at that. You know, and the problem is this. What is the American experience with this? Let's talk about some wars America had where we did change things quite a bit. There was the Philippine War, a forgotten war, where U.S. Marines were fighting in the Philippines and invented the .45 caliber pistol for that reason. Okay, brief history on the history of guns, because I like guns, and my grandpa's a Marine. He always likes telling me the story. When the U.S. Marines were fighting the Filipinos, right? They had the Huks. I think it was the Huk tribe, right? The Huks would chew a root, and the root would make their bodies go numb, right? That's according to my grandpa, at least. And what happens when you're numb? Well, you don't feel things. At the time, the U.S. Marines were using 9mm pistols. They'd shoot these guys, and they'd just keep fighting because their brains did not register they'd been shot. You know, there's a weird thing with the human body where if your brain doesn't register something, it's like you don't really die. And so you get guys who get shot, and they don't realize they're shot until afterwards, then they die. So what happened was this. The Huks were fighting the U.S. Marines. They'd come out with, machetes. Anybody ever seen Philippine martial arts? Eskrima. I actually did that for a bit. Eskrima, also called Kali, where they fight with two machetes. They were fighting, they'd come out and they'd chop up the Marines and kill them. The Marines had an idea. Well, the problem with a 9mm bullet is it's a small round. It goes right through you, and you might not realize you were shot. And so they had a great idea. Let's invent a larger caliber, a slug. So they invented the .45 caliber pistol. And, what that does is when you get hit by it, you jerk back, you feel the impact. And the effect of that was this. When the Filipino rebels were fighting the Marines, they'd get shot with the .45, and then despite being numb, they'd look down and say, "Oh, I've been shot," and then they'd die. Whereas, before their brains weren't registering it because again of the interesting nature of the human brain, right? And so that was one of the ways they won the war. Long story short, America stabilizes the Philippines. The Philippines almost became a U.S. state. They didn't want it in the end. I don't know, maybe some of them wish they had, maybe some of them are glad they didn't. But the Philippines almost became a U.S. state during that time. That was an experiment in nation building that actually kind of worked. Again, I think had the Philippines become a state, it would have been very interesting. The United States had great success in turning Germany and Japan into very good economies. Now, you could also argue Japan was a bit, they were like feudal. They were a bit different prior to World War II, but they were a big industrial nation. They did put together a big army. They had all the things there to build a modern civilization, and so maybe it wasn't too hard with them. Same thing with Germany. You know, getting Germany to build a modern Western civilization was not hard because they were already a modern Western civilization. It was not a difficult process, but they, you know, through U.S. help, got back on their feet. Same thing with South Korea. Korean War, America helps turn South Korea into really one of the top economies in the world. Same with Taiwan. American support, influence helped turn Taiwan into a modern, successful global economy. We tried the same thing in other countries. Afghanistan did not really work. Many people could have told you that would happen, including the Soviet Union and many other people going back to Alexander the Great. You could have read some old books and probably figured that one out. It might have worked. Iraq is a different story, actually. Some people say, did it work? Did nation building work in Iraq? A lot of people would answer it's complicated, and they'd say we kind of need to wait and see. One thing Trump talked about just recently is actually Iraq has been working with the United States quite a bit. And folks, who here has heard much about Iraq in the headlines over the last few years? If you haven't heard anything, it's probably because things are doing okay there. Iraq might turn into a somewhat success story. So, you know, again, we've had mixed results with regime change, but America does have some big successes on that front, and some big not very successes. Let's say that, right? Anyways, folks, thank you so much for being here. Let me know what you think. Do you think we've succeeded more than we've failed, or failed more than we've succeeded with regime change? I don't know. You know, I don't know. It's hard to change a government. It's hard to change a culture. It's hard to change a culture. Even some of the great conquerors in the past, look at Genghis Khan, for example. It's not easy. You can be the greatest warrior in the world. You might not be the greatest king in the world. America is fantastic at winning wars. We can go in there and we can destroy an entire military in 2 weeks. But many Americans would argue we should do that and then get out after 2 weeks and not keep it going. You know what I mean? Do you think so? Do you think we should do that? Do you think we should stick around and help with regime change? Let me know. What do you think about Iran? Should we help them get back on their feet? One way or the other? Let me know what you think. Folks, that said, join me tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much for being here. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It does help us a lot. So if you like this video, help us out too. Don't forget to like this video. That said, thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.